Hi, welcome to Cecil TV. My name's Doug Donnelly. The Bainbridge Development Corporation was formed in 1999, making its mission to put the property that was formerly the Bainbridge Naval Training Center to productive use. Makes that mission 25 years old. So today, we welcome Toni Sprenkle, Executive Director of the BDC, and Jennifer Peterson, whose title she will have to clarify. So welcome, Toni. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hello, thank you for having us.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. So first, starting from nowhere, where people are maybe totally unfamiliar with all of this, what is the BDC?
So, the BDC is a quasi-public entity, which means a marriage of public and private. We were created via legislation, which is what puts us into that public category. But which most folks do not know, we receive no funding at all from the state. We are not a state entity, so we are not on the state budget. All of our operations and activities are funded by our private development team. So we were created specifically with a special mission to redevelop the former Naval Training Center at Bainbridge.
Great. So for many years, even before the creation of the BDC, there were many suggestions about how the property might be used. Some people wanted a NASCAR track, and other people talked about a research campus or a satellite campus for the University of Maryland or something like that. But why then? Why has the Bainbridge property become a logistics oriented area as opposed to some other purpose, such as housing or recreation or so forth?
I will try and give you the short answer because it could be a very long answer. The original general development plan that was approved in 2004 was for a mixed use development. So it did have residential, some commercial, some business, some educational. There was no industrial plan for the property back then. But unfortunately, once some initial sampling went through with the voluntary cleanup program at the Department of the Environment, they found some residual issues, which fast forward 10 years later, a lot of investigations, a lot of work done, and all parties agreed that it would be the most cost-effective and efficient use to take that residential use off of the table for the property and instead transfer to a commercial industrial. To clean up soil to a residential standard is a much higher a level of effort and cost associated than if you were to do a commercial or industrial use. And that's really what made the big difference between the change in development plan. And I guess you could say it was a little bit of a blessing in disguise for the contamination issue, because the property was slated to have 1,200 residential units, and that was approved right around 2008, which, as we all know, the housing crisis. A lot of those units probably would still be sitting there had that been the original development. So we do feel very positive that this will be a good use for the property, and it will provide a wide range of potential commercial and industrial tenants. And it's basically just the first phase of development that has been titled the Logistics Center. Really, you could have any commercial or industrial tenant on the property. There's just a restriction for no residential or recreational.
Right. So that leads us right into my next question, which is, can you talk about the phases and the where we are today in relation to those phases?
Yes. So the property is 1,185 acres in total. In 2019, we had a development team that came of interest for a logistics center, which is MRP Industrial. That is who we have worked with on the phase 1 project. It's 444 acres, which have been divided into 4 building parcels. And the buildings are as small, and I say small because it's relative, but 378,000 square feet is the smallest building that's planned for phase 1. And we go as large as 1.9 million square feet. So those buildings are engineered and planned for a industrial use, which could be manufacturing, logistics, distribution. It doesn't necessarily just have to be warehouse. It's just that industrial component. So that's the first phase, which was transferred to the development team in 2001. They started the pad development and have 2 buildings completed, which are Building B and Building C. Then parcels A and parcels D are pad ready. And basically the difference between those 2 is you can do build to suit, which is you are specifically ground up for a tenant and they design the building, or you can do built to spec, which is speculative development. That is what we have for 2 of the buildings, which are the most commonly utilized in the industrial world, a 600,000 square feet and a 1 million square feet. So in essence, the building is there, all of the infrastructure, all of the utilities, but a tenant will come in and they will fit it for their specific use. So that is just that 444 acres of phase 1. Everything outside of that, we would technically consider phase 2, but because of our funding with the United States Navy, we carved off another smaller section, which we have titled phase 1A, and that was to utilize funding that had already been authorized for that phase 1 parcel, but we didn't end up actually needing all of that funding. So we've got another portion that we call phase 1A. It's about 150 acres total. We could fit 1 more large building over there if that would be what the market demands. And then the southern portion of the property, which is phase 2, we could fit another probably 4 to 5 buildings in that area as well. Now, there has not been any definitive site plan set for the rest of the property outside of phase 1. Given the ebb and flow of the market, our development team felt it would be best to have land readily available that folks could address whatever their needs would be, because it might be that a tenant needs a very a large parcel for 1 large building, or they may end up needing a parcel for 3 smaller buildings.
Right. Is 1A, has the soil in 1A been remediated?
Yes, good
Okay.
question. So phase 1A does have the regulatory approvals from MDE. So we have received what's called a no further action determination from the Department of the Environment for phase 1A. So that parcel is ready for development. Just about 21 days ago, so 3 weeks ago, we received our additional contract funding between the BDC and the U.S. Navy to address any other residual contamination of concern in that phase 2 area. So we'll be, fingers crossed, hopefully starting that site work in the fall once approvals and everything come through from the local jurisdictions. But that's the only area that still has any cleanup work that needs to be completed.
Right. And that's phase 2 you're referring to. Right.
Yes.
So that still is in process. So MRP Industrial purchased, they own the 444 acres.
Yes.
Does that mean they are on the port deposit tax rolls?
It does indeed.
So has the town is already benefiting from
Yes.
Minus the economic. Does the enterprise zone take away from that, or
So what's interesting about the enterprise zone is the state actually subsidizes those credits that the developer receives. So on paper, it looks like the town of Port Deposit would be giving up those funds, but the state will actually backfill that money for the enterprise zone credit. So a developer receives that incentive, which is a great incentive for the state of Maryland.
Sure.
But then it doesn't negatively impact the local jurisdictions.
Great. It's certainly a great thing for Port Deposit.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, the I guess kind of the mystery piece of all of this is the Tome School.
Yes.
In I guess legislation was passed creating a park, Port Deposit State Historical Park. Which, so does that mean that it's the future of the school and adjoining areas is now in the hands of DNR?
Yes. So the legislation that currently sits, it created the Port of Deposit Historic State Park. It was created as a county and state joint park, and I am by no means a park expert. So I'm sure that DNR could correct me on some of these things. But yes, the legislation would take the Tome School campus, which we have the meets and bounds for that is about 50 acres. It would also include the Snow Hill Archaeological Site, which I think there's often a misunderstanding that the Tome School and Snow Hill are one property or one campus or share history, and they actually do not. They're two completely separate parcels, and they have a very different history. Snow Hill was the first free Blacks community in the area, and the buildings, the homes were quite literally built up on stilts on the hill, which is why it was called Snow Hill. And so when those buildings were taken down, the Maryland Historic Trust had put a historic preservation easement on that area to ensure that it would stay preserved and that it would never be expanded. It's not in a developable area that could be utilized for development. It's a very, very steep grade, but they wanted it to be protected just to ensure that it could never fall into buffer space. It could never be taken into a right of way. So that would be preserved indefinitely. And then the Tome School campus was a very affluent school for boys that was built with the endowment left by Jacob Tome. So the park would take those two parcels and an additional what has been called a wooded conservation area. So additional 60 to 70 acres outside of the Tome School campus. And it would create this Port of Deposit Historic Park that would be under the ownership of DNR. So BDC is still currently the owners of all that land. And we've been working very closely with DNR on whatever is needed on our part to ensure that the legislation is held it's kept as it is intended and the transfer would go smoothly. But ultimately, we are not the drivers of that bus. We're just trying to be of assistance as best we can.
So do you have any sense of DNR's or anybody's long-range vision for the Tome School property?
I do not at the moment. So part of the legislation created an advisory group, which has a wide range of individuals on it, very well represented locally and statewide in the folks that could really contribute to what this park could look like. I think there have been a lot of really good conversations in what are the parameters for what is categorized as a state park or a state resource, and what could this ultimately look like? I think one of the biggest topics right now for any entity in the state is budget funding and limitations. So I think that the financial status of the state will certainly have an impact on what ultimately can happen, at least in the short term, for the park. But I know that DNR has been, their park service has been very excited about it. We've had their staff out many times, lots of different ideas on how it could be utilized. But so I'm excited to hear about what the ultimate future of the Tome School would look like. I think it's great to have public access out there. But smarter minds will determine what that park looks like.
Is there anything? Did we miss anything? Is there anything coming up? Any events or? Kind of summer's kind of a quiet time.
Yes, that's a good question. Trying to think. I don't think there's anything necessarily event related. It's just a very exciting time for Bainbridge. I came to Bainbridge in 2014, which was a very different climate. At that time, we had just finished all of the site-wide investigation work that was ordered by MDE due to the levels of contamination that were found during initial sampling processes. So I came in the thick of legal negotiations. And if you think about this situation, it's kind of very, it resembles like a home buying process. The seller wants as much as they want, and the buyer wants to pay as little as possible. So at that point, the BDC had a concern, obviously, of the environmental status of the property. The developer had a concern on the legal ramifications of all of their planning, and if their development plan would look completely differently. The Department of the Environment had a concern always, human health of the environment, making sure that everyone is kept safe. And then the U.S. Navy had a huge liability on their hands that they certainly did not expect, because the property was transferred as remediated, suitable for transfer. Very different environment now that we've got these wonderful cooperative agreements between the BDC and the U.S. Navy. The Department of the Environment has been extremely helpful. The town and county and state offices have been very solution oriented, understanding that this is a very large piece of property. So just to give an understanding, that original general development plan, in order to implement that, it could have cost up to $300 million, which I think we can all agree is not a great use of taxpayer money. Because ultimately, anything that comes from a government entity, we are all footing that bill. So I think it was really wonderful to be a part of that that cooperative process and understanding how can all entities and all stakeholders give a little bit, so that way we can have a productive use. It brings jobs, it brings investment, it's tax revenue to the town. A lot of infrastructure improvements, that's water, sewer, power upgrades, fiber upgrades, new roads. There's so many things that the public will benefit, all kinds of amenities that I know will come to Port Deposit with increased funding. Being able to do that with our budget from phase 1, phase 1A, and phase 2, that original estimate was over $300 million. We're coming in at under $13 million to be able to remediate the entire property and bring productive reuse, which is a minuscule fraction drop in the bucket of what will actually be invested in the property. When you look at site-wide, from phase 1, phase 1A, phase 2, it could be over $1 billion investment, which is incredible. It's just a wonderful time for Bainbridge and for the local community. Construction is difficult on local residents, but I think we kept a very good relationship and trying to work with everyone as best possible. I'm excited to see who ultimately lands in the buildings. It has been a wide range of inquiries that we've received. So I'm excited. I'm very excited to see Port Deposit in 2034. hopefully I'm still here.
Yeah, me too. Okay, well, that's all I have, but it's thank you. It's pretty good overview of what's happening.
You're welcome.
All right. Well,
I know that like you said, it's been over 25 years at this point of history, and trying to put that in a small snapshot can be very challenging. But I would encourage anyone that would like more information, they can always reach out to Jen or I at our office. And if you go to Jen's great, she puts out a monthly newsletter, so you can sign up for the newsletter and get all the happenings Bainbridge related. But we also have our annual reports on our website. So if you'd like a little bit more in-depth detail of our year-to-year activities, we try and break that out and cover the major progress for each year. So those are always a great resource as well. But we are happy to answer questions and share whatever information we have.
Great. Well, Toni Sprenkle, Jennifer Peterson, we thank you both for your time today, and good luck to you both, and let's find some tenants.
Yes, send them our way.
Send them our way.